All right, so week 16 classwork. We are coming to the end. Really, beside after this item, it's really only 3 items left. So check out based on when you look at this that the Access Lab test should be available, and at least for you to submit the final. And I'll talk more about the final in week 17. So go ahead and open up your classwork docs, and I'm going to have you take a few notes, and then most of what you're going to do this week is actually do something I've been talking about for a little while, which is you're going to build a simple site, and you're going to put it up on a website called Github that will allow you to then have a website that you can share. Okay, so here's again, take a few notes so that way you know what I'm looking for. Okay, and as I go through it, so what you're going to do is you're going to have a starting point. Okay, and actually I didn't really want to click on that, but that's okay. Oh good, I'm glad I saw that because it's not the right but you're going to start on the Codecademy course that we didn't take, that actually you could take if you wanted to just get some more knowledge, which I recommend. Because if you're somebody, as you were doing this, that enjoyed this part of our class, definitely I would say go back and take the rest of what we didn't. And then think about taking other courses here at Fresno City, at GeekWise, online, wherever your schedule allows, because this is just good to know no matter what your career path, and I know you've heard me say that. So we're going to do something that's fairly common, but we're going to do it with something that most people wouldn't think about. Okay, and it's basically having a starter that you then modify. We're not going to build this website from scratch, so make sure that goes in your notes. We're going to take something and we're going to modify it. So the thing that we're going to take is we're going to take this CSS course, and actually if you click into the course, we're actually specifically going to take the one on color. Okay, so the one on color, when you click into it, built this really nice looking site. I've looked around. This is the one I like the best. Oh look, I can already see. I'm going to reset the code. And here's why I say this. Is that this picture was already, so this is good actually, because this is part of what you're going to do. I was already playing around with this, but so what you're going to do is you're going to take this site. So this is an index file, which is your markup, your HTML, and then this is your CSS file, right? So your styles file. So what I did already is I just went in here and was playing around with giving it a picture of my own. So, but in general, so the first thing I'm doing is just walking you through what you're going to do. Okay, so you're going to take this base and then you're going to modify it. Right now, how are you going to modify it? And here's the outline I've given you. You're going to update the title, the image, you're going to add and remove content. You'll see what I mean, and you're going to add a footer. Right now, here's the other thing about this, is that you can either use your own information. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to use this for a resume site, this is a great way to do it. But if you don't, and you just want to use in either maybe a living character or a fictional character, I've had students use various things, somebody they really like and enjoy. So I'm giving you some flexibility here. I'm going to use myself because this is something I kind of need to do anyway. So then, and I'll walk you through all this. I'm just at the beginning here giving you an overview so you know where we're heading. And then once you're ready, once you've modified the content the way I've shown you, right, then you're going to place your 2 files. Now again, what files are we talking about? We're talking about the index file and a CSS file. And these are 2 physical files right now. We'll talk about this more in a second. But you're going to place those up on GitHub in a way that I'm going to show you that renders a website based on the username, right, GitHub IO, and I'll show you, I'll walk you through this. And then the last thing you'll do is actually share this with me underneath the notes that you're taking right now. Okay? Okay, so again, we have a starting point. We're going to make some changes. Once the changes are done, and I recommend don't do the next part until your changes are done, although you can still make some changes up on GitHub. But in general, it's just easier. Then once we do that place, then we'll actually come and share it. Okay? So we're not quite through with the notes. We'll get started in a minute. So there's a couple things here about the way you're going to make these changes. One thing you could do if you wanted is you could actually just change it right in here. And once you're ready, right, you could copy and paste this in. And by the way, I'm going to maximize this so I can see it. Okay. So here's the site, right? So this is the thing that's a little hard to see here about this. And this site is it's got all this Codecademy stuff wrapped around it, right? And when you see this, it's going to have a coffee cup. And I just threw an image of me in there, and I'll talk about why this turned out the way it did in a second, right? But so you can. So that's option one. So in your notes, option one, if you want to, you could just go through here and modify this. So the CSS, there won't be really much modification here. I will have you add a footer at the end, but it is good to remember, right? So because it's been a little while in our course since we did the HTML and the CSS, it's good to review, you know, what this does. So these are the selectors and the CSS that then get applied to the HTML, right? And then here's the HTML. So here's the title. Here's the font. So actually the other thing I'm going to have you do, and I'll make sure I update the write-up, is I'm going to have you choose a custom font, and I'll show you how to do that. And then here's and this won't change, but this is a link to that CSS file, because even though, you know, there are two files, you have to tell the index file where the CSS file is. The best of coffee regions. So this would be here, right? So you could, and again, I'm gonna show you a different way to do this. Oh, notice the error and that's the other thing, is you actually have this nice built-in editor. So in this case, we're into the body. We have a class called header. We have an H1. Now, if I hit run here, what you would see then, right, is it takes that, and you can see this just by playing around. And if I come over to style, I would then see in style, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the header, right? So here's the background image on that, and here's the height and the position. And then within that, I believe that was an H1. Let's go back and look, right? So in here, a class header, and then in here was an H1. So then we could find, if we wanted to change that style, we could go find it, right, for the H1 and header, or we could just, let's go see. Again, this is really the process, and I'm going to show you an easier process in a minute, but I just want you to know, if you choose to play in here, it's maybe a little more challenging, okay? Maybe, I say that maybe, okay? So here is that H1, right, and without grabbing the hex codes, I think what I could do here, and let's just see if I could just do white. I think I can just do white, and then I'd run. Let's see. Oh, yeah, see, that was right. Okay, so you get the idea, right? So, but again, you're still taking notes. You're not quite ready to get started yet. I'm just giving you the overview. Now you get this message because it wants you to do this stuff over here, okay? So what I'm going to do is actually show you the way as somebody who really does this, right? This is more along the lines of what somebody who really does this. They wouldn't work inside Codecademy. Again, this is an option if you wanted it, right? But what I like to do when I'm doing something like this or any development, right, is I'm going to use a full editor. And that's the last piece before we jump off to actually doing this. And I've given you a link to 3 code editors. I use VS Code. Sublime Text is very popular. Atom is very popular. I've also given you a link to a color, a nice way to explore color, because that's one of the things I want you to do. And then here's a link to Google Fonts, and then this is where we're actually going to place all of our work once we're done to create a website. Okay? All right, so hopefully you at least now conceptually understand what we're going to do. What I'm going to do, right, is I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually create these 2 files locally. But before I do that, let me show you, because I actually did this project, and this is VS Code. This is, again, this is not required, but I think this would be easier, and I think you'll see what I mean. And I've already created a directory called CIT15 WS, and I'm going to go ahead and open that, right? So I actually have my index file here, right? There we go. And then if you look in this directory, I also have my styles in here, okay? Now there's various ways I could look at this output, because what you're looking at is just the HTML itself, right? And VS Code has some nice stuff built in, but to make this just easier, right, what I'm going to do is show you how to look at this in the browser. Because now that we have a code editor, we can go through and start editing things. But I want to show you what my finished product looked like, right? So, oh, actually I do have it already built in, but I'm going to show you a different way, because this requires, in order for you to get view in a browser, you have to do this add-on, and it's kind of a pain. So I thought I'd show you just a very simple way of doing it. Okay. So I'm going to go to my Finder. Now my Finder would be the same as if you're in Windows, your File Explorer. And then I'm going to go to this website, and here it is, right, this directory. Right, here it is, and there's my index file. Again, you're still taking a few notes. Okay, so this is my pretty much close. I got a few more things to do to it, right? So I modified the header. I got an image of me, and I'll talk about the size of that thing in a minute, just to give you a frame of reference for why what you provide as far as an image will look different, because you only have so much space in the page to do it. You can see I changed my name, placement, and color. I created some overview content. This is part of the content that you need to write, right? So remember, looking back here, right? So you can see that this was their note on roasting. So this is where you'd write, you know, if you're doing about a person, this would be kind of just your general statement, right? And then here they had these beans and stuff. And so what you will do here then is, and I did this, is I just talked about a couple of current events I'm doing. Again, if you want resume stuff, you might put resume related things here. And then after that, I put, you know, my day job, and I need to add a little more to my Fresno City, and then my volunteer job that I do. And this was something the other site didn't have, which was a footer, right? Okay, so that's the output that I'm going to end up uploading into GitHub when we're done, right? But I'm actually going to show you now, all right? So I think we have enough to get you started. So now we can switch from you taking notes to you actually doing it. And actually, one last thing before you switch off notes, you want to just tell me in your notes what process you're going to follow. Are you going to use the interface from Code Academy, right, for updating things here, right? Because you'll have to kind of figure this out, and you can play around and do it. Again, I'm about to show you something that I think will make why you want to do it the way I'm showing it, but I'm not going to force it on you, because it does mean you have to install additional piece of software, right? But what do you think you're going to do here? And you may change. You may start it one way and then decide, no, I'm going to do something else, okay? So the two things I'm going to add to the write-up is I'm going to have you change the font, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to have you update and do some color changes. Like you could change the color of these, you could change the color of the background, right? Okay, so let's actually get started now. I do want to reset this code, so hold on, I'm going to find out where to reset the code. Okay, cool. I found it. It's right down here. It took me a minute to find it. So I'm going to get rid of that for a minute. So what I'm going to do here, and this is the process I will use, but doing this will help you modify it, because part of the challenge here is figuring out where and how do I modify things, because part of it is just straight content, right? Part of it is also adding and changing some of the styles. So first I'm going to grab this index file, and I'm going to grab all of it. Now I'm going to use Control. Oh, I can't. It doesn't isolate it. Okay, so I'm just going to select that whole thing. Right, I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to come into, again, my file manager, and I showed you before where I created it, so I'm actually going to do it on the desktop this time, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it WS Demo. Oh, that's a funny name. And then in here, right, I'm going to create a new file. Oh, actually, no. Actually, yes, I am going to create a new file. But now that I have that directory, there's actually a couple ways you could do this, but let me move now to my editor. Okay, so in here, in my editor, and you can't see it, but I'm going to hit File, I'm going to hit Open, And under open, I'm actually going to go to that place on my desktop where I created that folder. Great. Okay, so there's nothing in there right now. Okay, so what I have here is the ability to create a new file. And so I will paste in that. Now notice how it's not, there is no what we call syntax highlighting right now, and it's because it doesn't know the name of the file. So I could come over here. I think you could do it either way, but you can just hit save as, and I will call it index.html. Really important you do the .html. Don't do uppercases, don't do spaces, .html. And the reason is your system needs to know what kind of file that is. And it associates that with the browser. I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. And now we're going to create another file, right? And we're going to create, right now it's saying find that CSS file, but we don't have that yet. So we'll create another new file here, new file, and then we'll call it style.css. So I'm kind of doing it like grabbing one, and then I'll grab the other, right? Okay, copy that. Come back to my editor, paste in that. Cool. Now I actually have my editor built or set up to automatically save, but I think by default it's not. So rather than to spend a ton of time showing you how, one thing you can see that if there's little round circles up on your items here, that means they're not saved. Okay, and you can come up and just hit save on there to save them, because you want to save them as you modify them. Okay, all right, so now that I have these, what I would do is go back to my browser, and there's two ways you could do this, but on my browser I'm going to do file, open file, and then I'm going to go find that directory. I'm going to find that file, and then that opens it in my browser. Okay, so this is a nicer way to do it, and here's why. Now what I'm about to show you is called DevTools, and I probably had to take some notes, but that's all right, just follow along. So at this point I think this is a better way to do it, because what you can do is right click, inspect element, and notice what it does. In my case, it actually shows it to me as a mobile device here, and over here it gives me a rendering of what's called the DOM, the document object model, and it shows me the styles, and it shows me so this is how it helps me know where I need to modify things. Okay, so the other thing you could do here, and yours might come this way, this might just be a responsive, but know that it's kind of fun to know this, is that you can change that mobile view. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to walk you through is how to change that image on the top. Okay, so one thing, and if you right click and you hit inspect on any particular element, right click inspect, what happens over here is it shows you the CSS that is controlling that item. Now why is that nice? Because rather than to have to read the file through and figure it out, for somebody that's just beginning, this is a nice way to just make edits, right? And here's the other thing, like check out this, like here is the code for the actual color, and so what I could click on here, and I'm like, you know what, I'd like a much lighter color. Oh, that's nice, cool. So these are temporary changes, right, that I'm not making to the file, but it's helping me, this DevTools is helping me see what changes I would want to make, right? And so here's the other thing, like the alignment here, right? So on the alignment, what I did is I said I want it right. Okay. Now you can't really see too well that because of, look at how much text is up here, right? So now that I know I'm going to want to make those two changes, and I'll come back in a minute and do the image because I said I'd do that with you. Now let's actually go, and I'm going to kind of cheat by, not cheat, I'm going to copy that because I know I won't remember it. So now I'm going to come over to my editor, and I'm going to find that H1. Now, by the way, the nice thing is here too, the editor actually helps you out, which is why using an editor is really helpful. I could paste that in there and notice it changes it. But this then, I would want to go on the, actually I want to go on the left. That's how I did mine, right? And I could talk to you about, we'll talk about this one in a minute. So that's changing the CSS file. And again, remember, mine's automatically saving. You'd want to hit save. And we're going to make one more change. We're coming over to the index file. And for me, right, I'm going to put my name. Cool. So I've made 2 changes now. I'm going to save both of those changes. Now I don't have to. Again, I'm showing you that just because you will probably need to. There is a quick way to do save, but I'm trying to minimize the amount of time. Now, one thing I probably should have done before we got here was shown you that if I hit refresh, actually what will happen is any changes you make in this area will not be saved, because that's the idea, is you want to temporarily make changes and see them. But when I hit refresh, and that's what this does, it's actually going to go look at the file and render any changes I've done. Okay, so cool. So there we go, right? So let me show you what I mean here. So you can see I changed this, right? You can also see I changed the location. So actually this would have been, so I'm making here temporary, and I'm just double clicking on there. So go right. And here's the other thing, I could actually I could say, you know what, I want to go about 70. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. Cool. So these are what we call temporary changes. And if I hit refresh, right, they'll go back to the way the file was. So, and if I want to really change them, then I would come over here, right? I'd go back to my CSS file. I'd go down to that H1 again. And then here, I'm like, oh yeah, this actually looked pretty good at 70, right? And this looked pretty okay on the right side. Okay, now watch the syntax highlighting, it will really help you. And again, save. So this is the process you use. Refresh, and so now those changes are in there. Okay, so let's do one of the more, I think, interesting, challenging things, which is this top, which is the header. It's a background image. Now again, I'm going to right click, I'm going to inspect, and here I can see that this is actually where that image is being pulled from. So if I just want, you don't have to do this, but I want to show you this. Actually, there we go. Actually, I think I can click on it. Let's see if I can just click on it. Look up. I know there is a way to do it. Oh, sorry, I can do it from here, can't I? So this is actually part of what it means to do this kind of stuff. Sometimes you just have to figure out, like, oh yeah, I knew there was a way to click on that. Oh, anyway, it's there. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So the other way you could do this, by the way, it just popped from where we were at, from elements to sources. So I'm going to go back because I just realized this is linked, but for some reason I guess I'm just not getting the click in there. So here's what I could do. And because this is up in the header, right? So we see that it's up in the header class that we see this image. And so what I could do is grab it here, copy it here. Okay, so this is actually the image itself. Ooh. Oh, yeah, it helps when you just tell it there we go. So let me take off. This is just the HTML. Sorry, not the HTML. This is just the URL for the file reference. So this is the actual image, right, that is being rendered into the page, right? And so notice how you're not getting the whole image, right? You're only getting, and really in this case we could look at it because it's 400 pixels height. So we could change the height here, right? We could say 500, make it wider. Maybe that's not what we want, right? But what I want you to do is choose an image related to, you know, either yourself or a character you're using. So here's how I did it. Right, so I went to my photos and I started looking around. Now you can put the, you know, again, I was looking through all my photos to see one that I thought might work pretty well. And remembering that, you know, I want it in the center. So actually I haven't used this one, so let me do this one just to walk you through it, because it's really, now these could be also up on your Google Drive. It doesn't matter the way, and these don't have to be in the shared with Rio, but these do have to be shared publicly. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to click on that and I'm like, you know what, that doesn't look too bad. I could edit it here in Google's interface, right? So I could actually crop it later if I find when I'm actually placing it in the page that it doesn't look the way I want. I could modify that later if I want. But for now, what I'm going to do, and nice thing too, you can apply different styles here, which is really cool. I have auto already on here. Like here's, oh yeah, see, I kind of like that. That'd be kind of fun. I kind of like that. So I think I'm actually done. I think I'll save that one, right? So now I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to hit share because this is in my private photos. I'm going to hit get a link. I'm going to hit copy. Actually, I can just click on it, right? So, actually, sorry, did I share that correctly? I'm going to try to hit share, get a link. Oh, yeah, that'll work. That works. Okay. So I could just copy this. Now I can't use, I believe, and let's actually go play with it and see. I don't think I could, and all I'm doing is selecting that whole, and I'm going to paste in, right? Just to show you, I don't think this will work, but let's see if it will. And that's just the shortened URL. Now how do we see if this worked? Hit File, Save, go back over here, hit Refresh. And see, it didn't work, and the way you know it didn't work, it didn't show up. So what you need to do is something similar to what we've done before. In this photo back here, I'm going to do this. Actually, I don't see it here. So I'm going to right click in the image. I'm going to say Open Image and a new tab. So by the way, this assignment is actually bringing together a lot of the different things that we've done in this class. So now I'm going to select that, Control C, boom. I'm going to come back to my editor, right? I'm going to grab this. Now, by the way, when you're doing this, make sure you're only grabbing the URL. Again, File, Save. Oh, by the way, right there, I saw it. Oh, there is auto save. Oh, you should choose it. It is easier than I thought. That's an update they did. So let's see if that works. That's awesome, right? So now there's obviously some work I'd want to do here. And by the way, the reason this is happening on each side is that the image itself wasn't wide enough. Okay, now I could modify that, and you can see the one I ended up doing, I did modify that, right? I modified that, and I found the right, so that took some playing. And the reason I wanted to show you, matter of fact, let me do this, because this is an important part. I'm going to do undo, undo. And on the URL, and by the way, again, there's so much really great learning that happens right in what we're doing here, because I could find out the original image dimensions of that original coffee by just looking at the URL, right? It's 1500 by 1000. So that's the pixels wide and the pixels down, the width and length. So that's why my image that I used showed up like that, was because right click, I could do inspect here, but I could also just look at the image itself. Oh, I think this is the image right here. So it actually, this is another place DevTools helps you, because there's actually other ways you could look at that size as well. But this looks like a 482 by 644. So that's why when we were looking at the rendered content on here, it was doing that. So I could play with that. I could find an image that had a bigger dimension, and it was probably also, I may have done an edit in there, but I could also play with this, and maybe this I could make a different color. So you get it? So this is really allowing you to, and giving you enough information for you to then go be creative, okay? Because what I want you to do, again, is I want you to change that header image. You don't have to change any of this in the header. Now let's talk about now the rest of the stuff we're going to do, right? So let's go back here. All right, let's go back here. Oh, Code Academy wants to know if I'm still coding. So we've updated the image. Oh, the title. Let me go over that real quick and then show you the last part that I did. And then we'll move on to actually getting it ready to go up to GitHub. Okay. So let's go back here. So title, let me show you that. So title is actually what shows up here as far as the tab, or if it's the only thing open, but in the code itself, and you may remember this from what we did, it's right here in the title. Shoo, so I could make, right, Rio Waller. Again, your fictional or non-fictional character. Okay. And in here, maybe I just put my first name. Again, I'm going to refresh. Ah, do you remember what happened? I put that other image back, right? That's why it's showing up that way. So I think you're starting to get it. And again, it requires you to play a little bit. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a really good thing, is to play a little bit. So we changed the title, we changed the image. I'm going to have you, okay, so here's the other thing. Add and remove content. Let me show you what I mean by that. Remember the note was where I did my overview, right? And then, something about, in my example, I used coding strictly equals happy. And then I wrote just an overview. And again, you want a decent sized paragraph here, right? And then I used that, and I'll show you in a second, those two first classes on the divs to create two events I did recently. By the way, here, if you were using a fictional character, you could add some kind of maybe event or something about them, right? Or about yourself, maybe something highlighted. You could even do this to list your jobs. Notice down here I did that lower, right? Because this actually here, so here's the other thing. So let's actually get into the next thing, which is I want you to do some color changes, right? So let's look at this. Matter of fact, let's go back here. Okay, so here, and notice on mine how you can see that, and that's because I changed the color of that. Now what do I mean by that? So in this case, if I right click here and I hit inspect element, I see that the note, right, has a color. It's an H3. Okay, so when I go to change my HTML, I'd look for my H3. If I wanted to change a color here, if I wanted to make that white, that'd be hard to see. Black, that'd be better, right? But again, part of this is styling, how it looks. And then I see I'm using a font called Railway. Now we're going to get into fonts in a second. But I can also change the font size and the font weight, and center is where. So, and the other thing is on these, you can actually just turn these on and off. Some of them will work when you turn them on and off, some will not. But what's nice is you can just see and what this says is by doing this, you're taking it out temporarily. Okay. Okay. So now, so let me go back to here. I'm going to right click in the area around it. So now this is actually the class and the div called roasting, right? And then this roasting here, this is the class. So it's actually up in here. Let me see just to make sure here where that color was, because what I'm looking for is a color around it. Overflow, display block here. Let me go back to mine, see how I did that inspect element, because I just don't remember, quite frankly. And it was the roasting. Oh yeah, the roasting does have a background. Oh, I added it. No wonder, right? So I actually added a background color to it myself. I think that's what happened. Roasting, background color. Yeah, for some, oh, you know what? I think that's actually ends up to be an error. I think that's what happened. I think I saw this, and actually it might have been an error on Codecademy. And I could tell, oh, actually this is not bad to talk about. We could talk about, let's just do white here, okay? So I'm going to do that. Oh, see that? That's actually not bad. That's actually not bad. Now here's why I was saying that. If you get the reason I like the editor, and again, you may after watching this go, you know what, I'm going to have to do the editor, Rio, because I can't imagine doing all this stuff that you've done in here. But the truth is, by watching me, I'm just for a minute gonna, go back to coding. All this work that I've done, you could be doing in here. No. Keep coding. Oh, no, I don't want to get to code. Doesn't matter, because that's not the piece where, and actually it is kind of good too. A little side topic here is to actually, it will help you work through here, because it's going to talk about colors, right? Opacities. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff here that I'm not even touching on. So, anyway, you could be making these changes like right now, right? We're talking about what we were just looking at. We were looking at the H3, right? I think that's what we were looking at. Okay, so I think that at least gives you now, by the way, we saw, come back here, I know I have a lot open. This is the page. I kind of like that white, actually not too bad at all. So I added a background color, and you could do that, right? Or you could, I just want to see a color changes. You're making this your own, which is, by the way, why I provided this last link on here to the Adobe Color, because what they give you is a really nice layout of color combination, color schemes or themes, so that you could, you know, it's like if you're going to change the theme, choose, look at these, and then you could individually change them. So here's what I mean by that. If I was to look at, can I edit the copy? Yeah, could I? So this is the hex number. So let's just show you if you wanted to do this. I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to copy that. So now here, right, I could actually do this, and I just have to put the pound, and then actually it actually just shows that up. So now if I was doing my roasting, right, it's this one I'm working on now. Oh yeah, see, that looks okay, but obviously now I need to change my H1 there. So H1 or whatever it was. Okay, so we're honing in on the end. Believe it or not, we're almost at the place, and the last piece of it won't take that much. It'll be relatively quick, but you want to do all the changes that you want to make to this that I've shown you. And the last thing I'm going to show you is a really fun thing, which is how to change fonts. Okay, so let's do, we're going to look at this link right here, which is Google Fonts. So before we go there, let me show you. In this document, in the head, there is a reference to the Google APIs, and it says font family, family equals, and then it gives, actually, believe it or not, two fonts. It gives covered by your grace, and railway. And then this is the font weight, right? And this says relative style sheet, boom, boom. Okay, so where does that come from? So, and how is it used? Two things, right? So if I look in my style, anywhere I see this, it's referencing back, right, to here to pull that font from Google Fonts. And Google Fonts has a lot of options here, okay? So I'm at Google Fonts now. So I want you to look through here, and I want you to do at least one font update. Okay, so let me just walk you through one, because sometimes it's a little weird, but it's really fun to see it happen. Now let's do one that's really fun. Okay, oh, I like this one. I'm going to copy that, font family selected, and this should look familiar, right? Because this is actually what we were looking at. Now, you could do this one of two ways. You could just add, I think this will work. I think you could just add this, or you could actually just add the whole link. So actually, let's do it. Let's do the easier way, which is just copy that, come back into here, and we'll leave the one that's in there, but we're going to add one. Okay, so now we have access. And by the way, when you're really doing development, each one of these fonts adds to the weight of the page, so you don't want a lot of them. But we have Indie Flower. So now I can come back over here, and I could say wherever I had, in this case, roasting, right, I could do, was it Indie, was it, let's go back and look, I don't remember. Oh, actually I'm just going to copy it, Indie Flower. And by the way, when you put it in your CSS, the only thing you don't want to do is add that plus, but I could do it here. And I think actually the other thing is, I think it's cursive. Let's Indie Flower, and it should be a plus. If it doesn't work, I'll show you why. So in this case, it would have been, oh look, it did work. Oh, that's cool. Let's see if you can see it. Right? Check that out. Right? So anywhere, so what did I change it? I changed it on the roasting, so that means anything, any paragraph within that roasting class got changed to that Indie Flower. Right? So again, that's a great way to customize your page, right? So with this just little bit of knowledge now, you can take, so we've taken this starting, so we're moving into the last phase of this, which is we're going to actually show you how to take this information and put it up on the web so that you can then have that for a website you could actually share on a resume or with folks, or if you're doing one for somebody else. Okay, so last step. So, and again, before I leave this, make all the changes you want, right? Let's go back and look. I think I've shown you all the changes I want you to do. Oh, the last thing was the footer. Let me just show you how I did the footer, right? Matter of fact, let me show you because I can actually look here. So what I did is I added at the bottom and design inspired by Code Academy, and that's really a good thing to do because I didn't do this myself. I need to give credit where credit is due. So I added a footer, I added a paragraph, and then I styled it. And then in my footer, I added a footer and a P within my CSS, and I gave it text align center, font size small. Okay. Okay. So I want you to have a footer and you want to give credit to Code Academy where you got this from. Okay. All right. So GitHub. So what you want to do is go to github.com, log in or create an account. You can use, in this case, your Google account. You can use a Facebook account, or you can create a new account like we did when we did Code Academy. Okay, so in this case I use GitHub a lot, so I have it already set up. So once you create your account and you get in, now what's really important is the username you use, right? So when you are creating your account, you give it a username. So for me, right, Rhea Waller made sense. And if you're doing this for a fictional character, right, what's important is when you create this account, this is going to be part of the website name. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is going to be part of the website name. So when you create that, right, just keep that in mind. And after this is the assignment's done, if you want to delete it, that's okay too. So here's the thing, and I put it in the write-up, so let me show you. So when you create, so on GitHub, let me just finish my thought. On GitHub, once you have created your account, keeping in mind that this is going to be part of the website, that will be the URL for the website, right? Then we're going to do what's called create a repository. And a repository is basically just like a folder up on GitHub. That's basically what it is, right? And I showed you in here like the username, and this is the important part right here, right? Whatever your username you've created, and then GitHub IO is got to go at the end. If you don't do this last part, it will not work. It will not work to render as a website. You can create a repo, it doesn't matter. So now back at GitHub. We're on the downhill slide, we're almost done. You're going to see this site and be like, that's cool. So new repository. Okay, so I'm going to create one first with my username .github.io, not Rio.io. Okay, great. Okay, they call these vanity sites. My website doesn't matter. It is going to be public. I recommend you go ahead and do a README file. Right? Ignore these things, or if you really get into this, you'll learn about this later. Again, take my CIT15 class. We talk more about this. So let's make sure I got it right. I got Rhea Waller, which is my username, and this is the part, if you don't add, it won't create a website. We hit create repo. Perfect. So now all we have to do is copy and paste. We're going to create some files. So it created just a default README file, and this is where you can give some information. There's a ton of stuff up on GitHub if you ever want to do some just looking around on GitHub to see what's out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new file, and that new file, I know you're not going to be surprised, is going to be called index.html. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Do not do capital letters here. Do not do spaces. Do it exactly the way I have it. Index.html. Okay, so this is where you can either grab this off your code editor, right? Now, by the way, I'm going to actually do this because I'm going to do this for real, for mine. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to open up my site that I had. I'm going to shut that out. But again, you can just copy and paste this. I'm actually going to do the one I did. So I'm going to grab, right, copy that, and then I'm going to paste it. Cool. Now this is where you don't get that syntax highlighting, stuff like that. Okay, you don't get it. So then all you have to do now, and it gives you kind of some hints. We're going to have to commit the page into the site. So we're going to say, you can actually just do that, creating index file, starting my site. Great. And we're going to and leave this as default. Again, if you get into this, you'll learn what master and branches are later. Okay, if you get into it. So let's go ahead and hit commit. Now, the reason I'm committing it in, so believe it or not, even with just the index file, and I'm doing it this way to show you the power of the CSS. Okay, so check this out. If I copy and paste this, don't click on it. If you click on it, that's something different, right? And I'm going to paste it. Guess what will happen? The HTML renders. Oh, and look, I can actually see an error I have. That's awesome, so I can fix that. Okay. So why is this important? Well, it's understand the importance between HTML and CSS, right? This is just your text, your markup, right? So actually, let's go back in here and fix. And the reason I say that is that tells me I had an error. So what I can do is come back in here. Now, hopefully you don't have to do this, but I can hit this little edit and I can come back in here and just go, oh yeah, that's right. And I can just now what you're doing, and this, it's updating the index file, right? And then I could say, if this happens to, like fixed minor syntax error. Cool. Done, done, and done. So now, again, I'm showing you this for a reason. I'm going to refresh that. I'm going to go back, refresh that. Cool. Now we're not done. Refresh it. Takes a second for it to reload. Sometimes it does take a second to reload on code on GitHub, so don't worry about that if that happens. So now we're going to do our second file where we're waiting for that to happen. So now we're going to come back here. It's committed since you get started. See what happens. Oh yeah. Anyway, so now let's go back here. Now that I have that, right? So let's go. You can either go back here, here. It takes you back to the beginning of the repo. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file. And I bet you're not surprised, and very important to name this file exactly what it's named in here. Style.css. No capitalization, none of that, .css, right? Again, I'm going to take all of this code that I've modified. And again, thank you Code Academy. Thank you the designer who started this so I could make my life easier. And now I'm going to create my CSS. By the way, if you're really doing this, we use something called the command line. Starting. Oh, not starting. Creating my CS file, right? Boom. Okay, so I'm almost done. Believe it or not. So I got to have these two files in here exactly like I've shown them, which by the way, this is also a public repo, so you can look at my code if you want to know how I did it, which is the other cool thing about this. So let me come back here. It'll take a minute. But look at that. Check it out. So now this is out available on the web, and then you can share this with anybody who has the link, right? Or anybody who has the link can see it. So what do I mean by that? We'll just finish this to make sure we got it right. As I go, I'm going to go to another browser. So this is the idea of you giving it to somebody else or sharing it out, right? Giving it to somebody who would want to see it. I'm going to open up Mozilla and I'm going to copy that. Oh, wrong one, right? So what am I copying? And actually, do you remember, right? So it's riowaller.github. I want to spell Rio so badly. Cool. So why am I showing you that piece? I'm showing you that piece to show you that you can share that with anybody out on the web. And it's not a bad idea to have a resume or a vanity site. Or again, if you use somebody else's site, that's cool, or somebody else's information. What I mean by that is like a famous character, right? Okay, so what I need to add to this is I want you to change the font. I've shown you the footer, but by the way, again, if you want to look at mine, and I'll give you, actually I'll provide this link. I'll provide this link in the write-up, is actually if you go just to this link, you will see my code, right? Which is totally cool with me because that's part of the idea of sharing, right? Is that you can see my code and look at how I did it so that you can recreate, because the idea is that you look at somebody else's and then you learn from what they've done. And you know, the idea is not to completely copy and paste, because that's not the idea. I'm looking for how original you know, your own style that you're giving this, and really looking at how well you translated both what we've done with Code Academy and what I've done in this video. Anyway, last thing, just give me a little feedback on this item. I know it was a little longer than normal, but I really believe these skills will help you in the future. All right, talk to you later. Bye.